Professor Zingales of Chicago Booth School of Business, you brought out a new book called A Capitalism for the People. In this book, you're calling for a return to the lost genius of American prosperity, competition. Very simple argument in terms of returning to a level playing field and avoiding or reducing the influence of political connections within society. Why have you brought this book out at this time?
I think because I am concerned that I see a deterioration in the US economy. The US economy has always been sort of the ideal for most people of a well-functioning capitalist system. And coming from a country that is devoted to nepotism like Italy, I always look up at the United States. But I start to realize that the United States is resembling more to Italy, and not for the good food and the wine, but for the importance of connections and the influence of business and political decision, and it's becoming more and more a chronic capitalist system.
So you would like to see the economy move back to a pro-market stance rather than being pro-business, that the huge corporations have too much influence through lobbying?
Absolutely. I think that lobbying has become from a defensive activity to an offensive activity. I think that most libertarians tend to be sympathetic to lobbying because they see lobbying as a way to defend business from the interference of the government, and to the extent it is like that, I think that is great. Unfortunately, lobbyists have become too good, and they learn how to move a step ahead, and now is sort of lobbying is designed to shape government policy to the advantage of business rather than to protect business against an interfering government.
How do you then regard the sort of populist movements in the States at the moment, the Tea Party, the Occupy Wall Street?
The way I see is the Tea Party movement is fighting sort of the big government, and the Occupy Wall Street is fighting the big business. And what they don't realize is they are fighting two faces of the same Leviathan, which is the intermingling of big business with big government. That's really the common enemy. And until we have not fully appreciated this commonality, I think every fight would be useless. So I think one of the sort of theme of my book is precisely that, to say, look, if you care about freedom, you should be equally concerned about excessive government and excessive power of business.
So are you then basically calling for a return to the sort of Reagan-Thatcher years, where they were propagating, say, Milton Friedman's economic policies, open markets and so on, with little regulation?
I think that the Reagan-Thatcher era were great at the moment they took place, because they took place after a period of excessive regulation, of excessive government intervention, and so you wanted to sort of deregulate the economy, get it growing, and so on and so forth. Now, we live through 20 years of triumph of the free market system and capitalism, etc. And at some level, what I'm arguing is that the business has become too politically influential, that for a system to be well-balanced, you must have sort of a good democratic balance to the power of business. And that, paradoxically, is true for business itself. And as I show in one chapter of my book, the power of finance at some level was not good for the financial industry itself, because it got too much its way to the point that backfired. So I think that democracy is a great system of check and balances. When you have too much power in one direction, you sort of destroy this Goldilocks.
Why was it then that so few economists could see the financial crisis coming?
I think that there was not a strong criticism of existing practices, and it is costly to criticize. both personally, and says people don't like when you criticize, and professionally. And while as academic we are insulated from most pressure, I don't think that we have retained our aggressiveness and our criticism. And I think that we should sort of start doing a bit of soul searching. And in the book, what I mention is we economists, and particularly in Chicago, we are very fond of a theory that is attributed to late George Stigler about the fact that regulators tend to be captured by the industry they regulate. And what is appealing of this sort of theory is that it doesn't postulate that regulators are bad people, but simply that the environmental incentives push them to be somewhat too soft vis-a-vis the industry they regulate. And I think that we academics have similar distortion vis-a-vis the subject we study. And I think that in particular, we at business school, we should be very careful because we cannot be distant from business. It is our subject of study. We need to know it. We need to interact. But we need to also trying to find the distance to analyze it.
Well, in your book, you're saying that business schools are partly to blame for what happened. Why? What have business schools failed to do?
There are two things. One is they failed to try to be a bit more critical vis-a-vis business practices that maybe were not particularly good. Or I think that when we teach sort of economics and business, we tend to take this very ascetic approach, like we are pure scientists. And I claim that you cannot be a pure scientist when you are a social scientist, because not choosing or not taking a position, it is taking a subtle position that is even more dangerous. And I have the highest respect for my colleague Gary Becker. He had sort of done a lot of contribution, including one on the economics of crime. And then one famous piece that he has is analyzes sort of the decision to commit a crime from a rational point of view, whether sort of the expected benefits of a crime is bigger or less than the expected cost. And I think this is great economics. I think it should be taught. However, what I notice is that when people teach this subject, they don't qualify it at all. And so by not taking a stand, you end up inducing in the students the perception that if it is rational to commit a crime every time expected benefits bigger than the expected cost, it is irrational not to commit a crime when the expected benefits bigger than the expected cost. And so if you don't do it, you're almost like stupid. And that's not what we want to teach our businessman or businesswoman. And I think that we should take a position on what we think is right and what we think is wrong, and what constitute good business practices and bad business practices.
Professor Zingales, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.